We're finishing up a 2-week series of talks we've been in called Families That Last. And last week, Pastor Caleb spoke all about what the Bible talks about with parenting through the different phases and stages of life. And he gave us this takeaway that was so good. He said that there is no way to be a perfect parent, but if we commit ourselves to be purpose-driven parents, then God will make it enough. And it was so good. If you missed last week, make sure you go back on our app or our YouTube page and watch that because it was solid. And today, we're going to continue the conversation, and we're going to unpack a group of verses in Psalm 127 that speaks all about the aspects of the family and of the home. So here's where we're going. Here's our roadmap for our remaining 30 or so minutes together. Here are the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a street artist named Banksy, building pillow forts, anxieties, a New York City poem, launching arrows, Knights of the Old Republic, and then what does all of that have to do with building families that last? If we are wanting to build families that last, we have to first look at the original intention of the family. Whose idea was it? Where did it come from? Did humans think of it up because we were just, a few hundred years ago, lonely and bored? So we're like, hey, let's start having families. Where did this original idea of family come from? That's where we have to start because it didn't start with us. It did not start with humans just thinking it up. God created the concept of family, of what it means to be together. And you may not know this, but God is super into family. He's constantly called our Father. He calls us his sons and his daughters, each other brothers and sisters. Family is at the heart of God's vision for the world. And anytime we take something away from its original intent and we move to what it wasn't originally intended to do, there will always be pain and there will always be problems. Because this thing was designed a certain way and we're trying to now do this, and that's going to be painful. And there are places all over Scripture that talk about the family. But I want to start us at one place in particular, in Matthew 19, where Jesus says this: the Creator originally made man and woman for each other, male and female. And because of this, a man leaves his father and mother and is firmly bonded to his wife, becoming one flesh, no longer two bodies, but one. Because God created this organic union of the two sexes, no one should desecrate his art by cutting them apart. No one should desecrate his art by cutting them apart. God created this organic union. God created the family. He was present in the first marriage. In fact, he was the one who basically held the first ceremony for the first marriage. But if God created it, just like this verse says, if God created it, let us not tear it apart. Let's not desecrate his work of art, because when art is desecrated, its value gets destroyed. There's this street artist named Banksy, and if you've never heard of him, he's pretty incredible. No one even knows if it's one person, if it's multiple people that just fall under that name. No one knows who he is or who she is. And Banksy, He goes around and just does this street art all over the place, and it looks phenomenal. If you've never seen it, just Google his name, and you'll see all kinds of cool stuff. Well, he had this one painting, and this painting was in a frame, and they were going to sell it off. So it went to this auction, and there was all these people in this massive room, and they're auctioning off this Banksy painting that's in this frame. And so they're, just like you see on the movies, right? They're calling out numbers and names and like, yeah, you, boom, sold to the person in red on the front row for probably a couple $1,000s, right? And this person gets up and he goes to collect the painting that he just purchased for a lot of money. And as soon as he takes it, what nobody knew was that Banksy was in the back of the room and he had this remote in his pocket. And he hits this button and the painting starts going through a paper shredder that he installed in the bottom of the picture frame. Can you imagine this guy walking up there, just dropped like $2,000 on this painting, and he's like, oh, here we go. It's just getting shredded to pieces. The art was completely destroyed. It was desecrated. The thousands spent on it were wasted away. When we take the work of art that God has originally designed the family to be, and we move away from its original intent, we are desecrating what God has created. We are taking it and we're running it through a paper shredder. So what's the purpose of the home? What's the purpose of the family? How do we live life in a home the way that God originally intended? To have a family that lasts. And we're going to look at a psalm together today that perfectly describes it. Something written literally thousands of years ago, but the wisdom of God in it is still true today. Psalm 127, 5 verses. We're going to read off the top, and then we're going to unpack it together. It says this: "If it is not the Lord who builds a house, the builders are wasting their time. If it is not the Lord who watches over the city, the guards are wasting their time. It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to the ones he loves. Children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. Children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will never be defeated when he opposes his enemy at the city gates." So let's unpack this together. We're going to look at 4 observations of the home built from Psalm 127. 4 observations of the home on how to have a family that lasts. If you're taking notes, the first one is this: the home must be built. The home must be built. The very first line in Psalm 127 that we just read says, "If it is not the Lord who builds a house, the builders are wasting their time." So let's get a little honest and vulnerable real quick. Show of hands, who in the room is married? Throw your hand up if you're married. Nice, okay, put your hands back down. Now show of hands, who in the room is single? All right, you may want to leave those hands up a little longer and peek around. You know what I'm saying? Church is probably the best place to meet somebody if you're single. I'm just saying. The first part of this verse we just read is all about God building the house, building a solid foundation. Do you want to know a key to this? A key to building a family that lasts? Building a solid foundation for a family happens before you have a family. It happens before. Now, you can do it after you have a family, but it's always going to be more complex, more challenging. It starts before. Building that solid foundation begins before you have it, while you are still single. The best time to work on your family is before you have a family. The best time to work on your marriage is before you have a marriage. The best time to work on being a parent is before you have kids. That is the time to build the solid foundation. Because you know what happens? If you get in a marriage, it doesn't make anybody better. It just amplifies what's already there. So if you're dating somebody right now and they're a jerk and you think, oh man, they're going to change after marriage. Yeah, they're going to change into a bigger jerk. They will. Because all it does is just amplify what's already inside. So if they're greedy, when they get married, they're just going to be more greedy. If they're selfish, they're just going to be more selfish. If they're pursuing God, then they're going to be pursuing God more. If they're selfless, they'll just become more You see, whatever it is before, marriage isn't going to fix anything. You start building the solid foundation on this end. So how can you do that? What are things you can put into place in your life? The best time to work on it is before you have one. So take the time you now have to build your solid foundation on the right things. Work on you. Build your spiritual life. Jesus echoes this when he tells a story about building on the right foundation. He says when we build our lives on him, his word, and his ways, we are building on the solid rock. So when the storms of life come, because he says there will be storms in life, when they come, guess what? You will last through the storms because you built on solid rock. You have a solid foundation. But he goes on to say, if you build your life not on a solid foundation, not on the ways of Jesus, then when the storms of life come, it's like you've built on shifting sand. So when the winds beat against the house, the sand starts to move and it crumbles and it fails and it falls. All because you did not build on the right foundation. The home must be built. It does not come turnkey. It is not built in a day. It takes time. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Almost a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, which is insane. You know one of the things they love to do? One of the things my kids love to do? They love building pillow forts. They love, so what we do, we take as many chairs as we can find in the house, and we put them in the middle of our family room, and we take all the blankets, all the pillows, everything, and we build these massive blanket pillow forts. And it is so much fun. It is amazing. You know what always happens with these blanket pillow forts, though? They eventually just fall down and crumble on top of us. Now, part of that could be because a 3-year-old is the one building it, but either way, it is not going to last because there's zero foundation. The foundation is a blanket draped over a chair. When we don't build on the right things, what do we expect is going to happen? Jesus is telling us when our foundation is Him, it will last. Any growth in life, it needs two things. Two things if you want to grow. If you take this, you're like, all right, what do I do with my life? There's two things you need to do to grow. You need to get head knowledge and hand knowledge. Head and hand. So what that means is head knowledge, you got to be aware of something. And then hand knowledge, you got to do something with it. You got to take action. So the head knowledge in this moment is like, okay, yeah, build my life on Jesus, the solid rock. I know that. I hear that. I understand that. So now what's the hand knowledge? What's the handles of that? How do I actually put that into practice? Very practically speaking, and this is going to sound so simple. Very practically speaking, we do this by being with Jesus. By being with Jesus. Because you know what happens when we're with Jesus? The more we're with Jesus, the more we spend time with Jesus, we start to see things in our lives that aren't really like Jesus. And so if our focus is just how can I just spend time with Him, then eventually we'll start doing the things that Jesus did because He's changing us from the inside out to be more like Him. But it all starts with simply being with Jesus. Get into God's Word. Learn what His designs are for you and your family. Because God's Word, it lays out a divine plan from a divine builder. So if you're in the room and you're single, ask yourself, what kind of life do I need to live right now before I have a family? What are the habits? What are the practices I need to put into place in my life right now before I even have a family, while I am still single? How can I spend time with God daily? How can I pray better? How can I pray more? How can I develop these habits into my life? While you're single, learn to trust God in every area of your life while it's just you. Because you're going to fall back on that when it's not just you. Learn what God says about your identity as a son and a daughter of Him. Not what the world's telling you are, but how God sees you. How does God view you as a son and a daughter? If you're not single, what kind of life, ask yourself, what kind of life do you live when you have a family? If you have a family right now, how can you serve your family better than you serve them currently? Go back and listen to Pastor Caleb's message last week. He talked about these habits we can build into our lives, about forgiveness and loving one, these things we can choose in our family. Maybe you're here and you're a little bit older. Ask yourself the question, what kind of life do I need to live when my family is grown? Maybe they have their own family. Maybe you don't have a family, it's just you. You may not have any blood family, but I guarantee you have a spiritual family all around you right now. And you know what younger people need? They need older people to come alongside of them and to mentor them and to show them maybe what to do, but also maybe more importantly, what not to do. Like, hey, here's what I did in my life, and I don't want to see that in yours. I guarantee you have a spiritual family right now in your circle of influence that you can be a spiritual mother or a spiritual father to, a spiritual brother or a spiritual sister to help lead and mentor. So ask yourself, who is it and how can I do that? The home must first be built. So what is the foundation that you are building right now? What do you need to start doing? What do you need to stop doing? The foundation is key to any home to determine if that home will last. So build that foundation on Jesus and His Word. Number 2, Number two, our second observation from Psalm 127 is this: the home must be protected. The home must be protected. The very next sentence in Psalm 127 says that if it is not the Lord who watches over the city, then the guards are wasting their time. The one who builds the home, the one whose ways built the home, is the one whose ways protect the home and preserve the home. God's ways are the things that protect it. Because there are enemies of the home. You know this, right? You probably know this without me even saying it. There's some enemies of the home, things like infidelity, things like selfishness, things like stress, anxiety, past pain, past insecurities that we haven't dealt with yet. Take marriage. Marriage isn't about what can I get from this person. Marriage is about what can I give? How can I serve this person better? Take stress. Are we so busy and stressed out that our kids are feeling the pressures of it? Are we running at a pace that our family can't even keep up with? What's your pace like? Are our kids in so many things that they don't have time for anything? And why? Ask yourself why. Is it to just keep up with what the culture is telling us that they need? Is it to keep up with some people around us that honestly we probably don't even like? Why? Ask yourself why. What is it doing to their souls? Are we running at a pace that our family cannot keep up with? Take anxiety, take insecurity. Are there things in your past that you haven't dealt with yet? Past pain, past insecurities that are affecting everyone around you. Because you know what happens when we don't deal with our past pain and past insecurities? Us not dealing with that now starts to overflow to the people in our lives, to our families, to our friends, to our children. I heard it once said, work out your anxieties so your kids don't have to. Work out your insecurities so your kids don't have to. Because if we don't, those things overflow in how we treat people. Think about your own life. Think about how your parents parented you. You can probably see things in their life that wasn't dealt with that just now has shown up in your life. So deal with the past pain, the past anxieties, the insecurities. Maybe in order for you to dive into this, you need to look at your life, look at your schedule, and ask, does it honor God? Does your family produce the kind of fruit that comes from God? Love, grace, selflessness, kindness, joy, peace. And if it doesn't, adjust your life so that it does honor God. Protect your home by protecting your time. What is it that your family, your spouse, your children need from you right now? Which leads us right into number 3. The home must be enjoyed. The home must be enjoyed. The very next line, remember, we're just unpacking Psalm 127. It says, it is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to the ones he loves. He says, it's useless to work so hard and be so anxious. Useless rhythms will lead to anxious work every time. Now, don't take this the wrong way. This is not saying that we do not work. This is not saying that we are supposed to be lazy people who don't do anything with our lives. That is not what Psalm 127 is talking about. Like, yes, life is going to require us to work hard. If you want to have a great career, that's going to take sacrifice. It requires a lot of work. He's talking about, in this verse, being content or being discontent. Are you burning the candle at both ends, not to put food on the table, but because we are trying to live on a level that we're not supposed to live on? Are you chasing materialism? There's this beautiful verse in 1 Timothy 6 that says this: godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Being godly is actually working hard. It is giving your best. We need to work. We were created to work. If you read the creation story in Genesis, We were created to work before sin entered the world. God gave us a purpose and a plan and something to do. And then sin entered the world and corrupted it. But there's this thing in us that was created to work. So yes, we are called to work hard. But what good is it to gain if you can't even enjoy? Yeah, I got the nicer car, but I'm going to have to put in 85 hours a week for the next 6 years to pay for this thing. Oh yeah, I got the bigger house. We got more room. We got more space. It's nice. However, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time there because now I got a bigger mortgage too. Like, why is it that we think that way? We get so caught up in that, don't we? Are you anxiously working in order to pay for a life that you don't even need to be living, to impress people you don't even like? What's interesting is that Psalm 127 is written by Solomon. And this was one of the Psalms that he wrote. And Solomon wrote a few things in the Bible. He wrote the book of Proverbs, a book all on wisdom. He wrote the book of Ecclesiastes as well, which is a book with even more wisdom. In Ecclesiastes, he writes this entire book about chasing after everything in life. He's like, I'm going to chase after everything. And he comes to this conclusion that chasing after everything is so meaningless. It's nothing apart from just following God. Everything else is meaningless. But what's interesting is he sprinkles these things throughout Ecclesiastes where he always comes back to this idea, and he'll say stuff like, be content and enjoy life. He's like, hey, as you follow God, be content and enjoy life. Because it's easy to not be content and then, therefore, not enjoy life, right? We get caught up in this work harder for actually nothing cycle that our culture just throws us into. We get swept up in it. There's this poem written on the walls in Times Square Station in New York City. So as these commuters every day are walking to catch the subway, they see this written every 10 feet. There's another word to this poem. And the poem says this: overslept, so tired. If late, get fired. Why bother? Why the pain? Just go home and do it again. And the poet who wrote this, Norman Colt, he says that to him, we are all in this do it again loop of exhaustion and frustration that eventually leads to depression. There's no enjoyment in that. The home must be enjoyed. Do you want to know how to enjoy the home? A very practical way to be content? How we can do this, what we can put into place and put into practice? In order to enjoy the home, something that we could do is simply be present. Be present. You know how hard it is to be present in life today? I mean, we've got everything we could ever want in the palm of our hands with our phone, now on our watches. Maybe even if you get the Snapchat sunglasses, now you got you never disconnect. Which there's a lot of great things to that, but you know what the problem with that is? We can never just stop. We can never just be present. So just something small we can put into practice is be present. Be present with your family. Be present with your kids. Be present with your spouse. When you're with them, be with them. Focus in on that moment. Be present. That is a lost art that we need to have in our lives. Have fun with your family. Smile with them. Have dinner with them. Go to the park with them. Do what they love, even if it kind of drives you crazy. My 3-year-old, he's in that stage of life where he is obsessed with playing with toys, and so he'll set them all up, and then he'll knock them all down. And he loves to do that. So he'll be like, Dad, come play. And I'm like, all right, and we'll get down there, and we'll set up all his toys, and then he'll knock them all down. And then we'll set up all his toys, and then he'll knock them all down. And then we'll set up all his toys, and he'll knock. And then, you see, it's that annoying when you're actually doing it, too. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, bro, come on, man. Let's play with the toys or something. Why do we got to just keep setting them up and knocking them down? But he is having so much fun. And you know what I realized? I'll sit there and we'll be setting up the toys and knocking them back down. And I'm like, it hits me. And I start thinking, one day, I'm going to look back on this and I'm going to miss this moment. Like, man, one day when he's 30, I'm going to call him, and I'm going to be like, hey, Jude, hey, man. That's why we named him that, just so we can always sing that song to him. Like, hey, man, why don't you come over and let's set up some toys and knock them all down. You owe me a few, bro. I know I'm going to miss it. So why not just be present in that moment? Be present with him and enjoy life. Set him up one more time just to knock him over. Maybe in order to enjoy the home, you need to rearrange your life a little bit. Because you know this is true. Our kids actually want us more than they want stuff from us. They want us. And now they may not say that, because the things they want, they're just going to like, no, I want that, I want that, I want the stuff. But deep down, they actually want us more than the stuff. You know how I know it's true? Think about your own life. Think about your own life. Growing up, did you care more about what your parents got you than the time they spent with you? Nah. When I look back, who cares what they got me? It was the time that we spent together. Our kids are the same way. So maybe life needs to be rearranged a little bit. I received some great advice about a year ago. And this man, so he was in his early 70s when I was talking to him. And he was telling me about when he was a young man. And he was like, when I was young, I had a young family, a young spouse. Like we were just young. We were just starting out in life. And he was a very driven person, so he was working. He was just very driven. He was working hard. He's like, I'm going to accomplish great things. And you know what he told me he did? He's like, I want to make sure I put something into practice into my life where I will always be home at least one night per week. I will be home one night per week so I can have dinner with my family, so I can put my kids to bed one night per week. And so that's what he did. That was the rule he made. You know what happened, though? He said after about a year or two, after some time of doing that, he started realizing there was just something off. With your family, just something feels off sometimes. He's like, man, there was just this disconnect growing between him and his family and his kids, and it was just something was off, and he came to this moment where he said, all right, I flipped everything on its head. So I completely flipped the script, and instead of only being home one night per week, I changed it to I am only going to not be home one night per week. 6 nights out of the week. He set it in stone. That is the new rule, not the exception. I will be home. We'll have dinner as a family. I'm going to put my kids to bed 6 nights out of the week. Can you, that is amazing. That is amazing. He rearranged his entire life so that instead he could be with his family. It meant a complete shift in how he lived, a complete shift in his rhythms. But now when I spoke to him, he was 50 years removed from making that decision. You know what he told me? The single greatest decision that he's ever made for his family. He said it saved my family, making that choice. Maybe you're here and you think, man, you don't know my life. That seems impossible. Be content and enjoy life? Come on now. Because that's what I thought, especially when he first told me the story. I'm like, dude, come on. Be content and enjoy life? Can we actually do that? In Philippians, Paul writes a verse that you've probably heard before. We see this verse all over the place. When I was in school, when I was a little kid playing Little League Baseball, we would write it underneath our baseball hats to give us an edge over our competition, even though they were also writing it under their baseball hats. And it's a little embarrassing when you have a verse of scripture under your hat and you strike out and you got to walk back like, oh man, sorry God, I let you down on that one. But we would write this verse of scripture under our hat. So maybe you've heard it. It says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. What a beautiful verse. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I love it. But you know the context of that verse? The context of Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ. It wasn't a baseball game. The context of it, if you read the other verses surrounding that verse, Paul is talking about contentment. All the verses leading up to it are You're asking me, how can I be content? I have learned how to live with much. I've learned how to live with little. He's listing all these things that he has done. He has learned how to be content. And he's learned how to be content because it is possible, because Christ will give us the strength to be content. He does give us the strength. So how do we get that? If you don't think you can be content, you can with God's help. It starts for you simply asking him, God, help me to be content. God, show me how to rearrange my schedule. Show me what is truly important in life. 4 observations of the home. The home must be built. The home must be protected. The home must be enjoyed. And then fourth and finally, the home must be prepared. The home must be prepared. How do we prepare our home? How do we prepare our family? More specifically, how do we prepare our kids? Because Psalm 127, it ends by giving us this example of kids being like arrows, right? I love it, what we read, that kids are like arrows and children. You know, arrows and children, they have 3 things in common. Every arrow and every child, they have 3 things in common. You know what they are? We shape them, we sharpen them, and then we send them. Arrows, just like kids, we shape them, we sharpen them, and then we send them. Shaping them, sharpening them. That speaks of the way we show them what it actually means to love God. We show them what it means to follow Jesus, to serve others, to love, to forgive, to sacrifice. We show them what it means to live with integrity, with honor, with good character, what it means to love community, to love God's church, to love worship, to love his word. I heard this statement that has stuck with me for years, that we are always teaching our kids, and only sometimes do we use words. We're always teaching our kids, and only sometimes do we actually use words. Because you know our kids, they're watching us. Now, they may not always listen to what we say, but I guarantee they are always watching what we do. What we say doesn't matter if what we do doesn't match it. What we say, it doesn't matter if our actions don't back it up. Do we model for our children what it means to love God, love people, serve others? Do we model for our children what it means to serve our spouse? Do we model for our children what it means to enjoy life and be content? We are always teaching our kids, and only sometimes do we use words. We shape our kids, we sharpen our kids, but then eventually, just like launching an arrow, we send our kids. And on this end, having 2 young kids, and I think about that day, that's a bit terrifying to think about. But maybe the most important thing we will do with our life isn't in what we accomplish, but in who we raise. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe your life, the most important thing you could ever do is in who you raise. When you launch an arrow, it's going to places that you cannot go. It's going beyond you. It's going to places that only that arrow can get to. And if it's shaped and if it's sharpened, it will get where it needs to go. I love that Psalm 127 ends by saying that he will never be defeated even when he opposes his enemy at the city gates. It's given us this picture of a warrior living in victory. Because our children, when we send them, they're going to go out and face a world of ideas and pains and problems and ups and downs, but they won't be defeated because they are ready for the battles that they're going to face. They're ready because we have prepared them, because we have modeled with our lives how to fight those battles. If you haven't noticed yet, this is heavy stuff. This is a big deal. You telling me the greatest thing I could do to my life is in who I raise? That is terrifying. This is big. Building families that last, it's not an overnight success story. It's not. It's beautiful. It's painful. It's purposeful. It's life-giving. It's tear shedding. It's filled with blood, sweat, laughter, joy. It's a lifetime. But when we focus on building on the solid rock, when we always come back to Jesus and how can I just be with Jesus and let that be my first thing, when we always come back to that, then it will last. Or if you're taking notes, I want to say it this way: building our family on Jesus will take a lifetime, but it will last the test of time. Building our family on Jesus will take a lifetime, but it will last the test of time. It will ensure a family that lasts beyond just us. In Proverbs 22, it promises us that. Proverbs 22 is a promise from God about that. Pastor Caleb, he shared this verse with us last week. I just want to read it again. It says, direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. They will not leave it. That is a promise from God that we can stand on. We can stand on that. Building our family on Jesus will take time. It will take a lifetime, but it will last the test of time. There's this story, this legend told of the Knights Templar during the Crusades. And legend has it that before these knights would go off, they would get baptized before heading off into battle. And if you read about it, it says that the knights, as they were getting baptized, they would take their swords and they would hold it out of the water so that everything would get baptized but the sword, to symbolize that they were surrendering everything to God except this one thing. They didn't want to give God that. They didn't want to put that under God's rule and reign. They were terrified of what they were going to do, so they would surrender their entire life except the sword. And when I read that, I couldn't help but think, how often do we do that with our entire life? It's like, yeah, God, I'm going to give you this and this and this and this and this, but I'm going to keep this one out of the water. I don't want to surrender that part over to you. But you know what God wants? He doesn't want pieces of us. He wants all of us. He wants everything. He wants us to surrender every part of our lives to Him, not hold it out of the water, but give it all to Him. And when we're talking about building a family that lasts, we can't without doing that. My prayer, God, don't let that be us, that we would surrender all these different things to you except this one thing. That we would surrender all of our lives. To truly build our family on Jesus, to have a family that lasts, it starts with us surrendering everything, all that we are, over to Him.